Chapter 5. The Adventure of Sir Tor. Sir Tor had set out quietly upon his venture, with none of the dashing valour of Sir Gawaine. Sir Tor's arms were very old and worn, being only such pieces as he had collected with loving care over a year's time. King Pellinore saw his son patiently fitting the rusty pieces upon himself, and he smiled with pride, for this new-found boy of his was what he felt all followers of chivalry should be, high of purpose, but humble of mien. "The armour is rusty, certainly," King Pellinore said to King Arthur as they stood watching, themselves unseen, "but his eyes are bright as steel. If the shield is outworn, the courage is not. Think you he means to adventure himself just as he is, without horse?" "That shall not be," cried King Arthur. King Arthur cried warmly. "Shame were it were on me if I let a knight of mine face his venture thus. Squire, bring hither from the great chest my suit of plate inlaid, and the sword with the jewelled hilt. Bring also the plumed helm of Milan work. Sir Tor shall not part from us till he is so fitted out as befits a king's son." King Pellinore stroked his beard, and his eyes twinkled. Arthur, you leave nothing for me to do for my son," he said. "Nay, there is one thing. Squire, go to the stables and bring here my great war horse, with the trappings of carved leather and silver work. A knight needs such a horse if he is to win advancement." When Sir Tor saw these presents, he was much moved, and his face shone with joy at so much goodly workmanship. And so he rode from Camelot alone to find the White Hound, and this was his first adventure. Slowly he wended his way through the forest land, studying the tracks of the wild things as they wandered up the woody ways, and listening to the songs of the birds. His heart was happy, and his smile joyful. Into his path stepped a dwarf as woefully ugly as he himself was handsome. The dwarf had slunk out of the bushes, twirling a staff twice as long as himself. He capered upon the leafy pathway, threatening with his heavy staff and leering evilly, his small dark face twisted with a grimace. Pity for the misshapen wretch was in Sir Tor's heart, for he felt that it must be a terrible thing to be so short and heavy, with such bandy legs that he could never don armour, nor sit a horse as a proper man should. The dwarf seemed filled with some revengeful spirit of cruelty, for suddenly he sprang forward and struck Sir Tor's charger on the head, so that it reared and backed, pawing the air in terror. If he had not been a good horseman, Sir Tor would have fared ill. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly, when he had mastered and comforted his steed. "Methinks it was a most ungentle thing to do, seeing that neither I nor this poor brute had harmed you." The dwarf shook himself and brandished his staff again. "It matters not, Sir Knight. You may not ride by here unless you first have ado with my brave masters who wait in yonder pavilions." "Are not the forest ways free?" asked Sir Tor mildly. "It is a strange thing that within King Arthur's realm, a bow's shot length from Camelot, a man cannot come and go as he will." "You may not pass," repeated the dwarf sullenly. Sir Tor looked at the pavilions, and at the shields hung upon the oaks, and at the great jousting spears standing there, their points winking in the sunshine. Regret was in his face as he shook his head. Good dwarf, it may not be. I have a quest to ride, one given me at the round table, and I must go on and give a good account of myself, or else be deemed recreant. I will force your decision, said the dwarf. He seized a hunting horn that swung at his belt and blew a loud summons upon it. The flap of the pavilion was dashed aside, and a fully armed man came out and mounted his waiting beast. He came galloping towards them, dried leaves scattering from his horse's feet. Sir Tor smiled, for now he knew that this was part of his venture, and that he might encounter this knight and dispute with him without being false to his mission. He crooked his arm and gripped his lance and spurred his brave horse forward from a trot to a gallop. With a crash the two met, but Sir Tor was the better man, in greater command of himself and his animal. True on its mark his spear struck, and, rock-like, he held in his saddle, so that the other man went hurling to the earth. "Do you yield yourself?" Sir Tor asked, as the fallen knight picked himself up and made to catch his horse. "Yes, sir, stranger knight, you can pass by these ways for me, for hardier nor better stroke I never felt. But I have a fellow knight yonder, who also seeks worshipful adventure, and I pray you that you will run a course with him also." "I will welcome him as I did you," Sir Tor answered. "Let him ride out against me." "He comes now," said the dwarf, who had been standing watching, a puzzled expression in his eyes, as if for the first time a doubt had assailed him as to whether his masters were as glorious champions as he had imagined. The second knight came charging down, the plumes streaming out from his helm. It was a colourful sight to see two such knights as Sir Tor and his adversary under the summer trees. Their spears splintered with the shock, but yet again Sir Tor was the victor, and the second knight yielded himself and asked for mercy. "It ill becomes me to kill you, who have given me such a pleasant meeting," Sir Tor answered. "But you must both of you do me a service. Go to King Arthur's court and surrender to him. When he asks us who sent us, what name shall we give? Simply say that you are sent by the knight who rides in the quest of the White Hound, and so go in peace and with my blessing, for you be both very worthy men. What names do you bear?" They told him humbly enough that he had vanquished those knights of high renown, Sir Felot and Sir Petipase, and so they rode away down the forest glades to Camelot. "If it please you, fair sir," said a voice, and Sir Tor looked down in astonishment, for here was a mighty change. The dwarf's arrogant looks were all gone, his lumpy shoulders were bowed, his eyes beseeched like those of a hunted and beaten dog. "A boon! A boon!" he cried. "Forgive my manners of a while ago, forget my foul blow, and grant me a boon." "If I can, I will," Sir Tor answered kindly, "and if you repent yourself, the matter is already forgotten by me. What is your request, good dwarf?" "Let me serve you and be your man. Right faithfully will I follow you, for you will not cast me off when I am no more use, as did those recreant knights who rode away with no more thought of where I should sup and bed me than if I had a dried leaf blown away by the evening wind. Poor misshapen man, your boon is granted. Get you a horse, if you may, and you shall ride with me, and so forth we will go to adventure and glory." Gratefully the dwarf did as he was told, and so, as the sun was setting like burning gold, they made their way into a thick forest of scented pines, where the gloom was as the night. You ride in quest of the white hound? Asked the dwarf. Then I can help you, for I know where it is. See, through this opening down into yonder valley there stands a pavilion, and a hound there that bays the moon so that his voice echoes to us even here. There is your white hound, Sir Tor. So Sir Tor rode down and took the white hound. The flap of the pavilion was raised, and a lady came out. Do not touch that hound, she said sternly. I must take him, said Sir Tor, for this is my quest, and from distant Camelot have I ridden to fetch it, and perchance also the knight who bore it off, if I may meet him. You will meet him, said the lady, and he will make you regret that you ever took on this quest. I will abide what fate comes to me, said King Arthur's knight, and he picked up the white hound and set it before him on the saddle, and so rode back to the dwarf. Do you know of any lodging where we may pass the night? He asked. The dwarf looked doubtful. There's a hermitage within a mile's riding, but I do not know what lodging you will find there. So we have shelter for our beasts. It matters not for us, Sir Tor said. A man should be able to lie hard and go hungry. After a while they came to the hermitage, and the good old man took them in. There is corn for the noble horses, he said, smiling, but dry crusts are all that I have to set before you. It matters not, he was answered lightly. All night long, while wolves howled in the forest, and the winds moaned in the branches of the pines, they slept there. By candlelight, before the dawn, they rose. And now we must ride away, Sir Tor said. Fare you well, good old man, and pray for me that I may carry myself in knightly manner at all times, and in all places where I shall be. All that morning they rode back towards Camelot, but before they reached there they were overtaken by a rider who came shouting after them to give back the white hound. It is the knight of which the lady spoke, who would do me great mischief if he could, Sir Tor told the dwarf. Take you the hound and hold it for me, and I will meet him. He laid his lance in rest and turned his horse to face his foe. And so the two charged together. So mighty was the force of their meeting that both were thrown from the saddle. But eagerly they rose and drew their swords and fought bravely, fought on and on till their arms became weary and heavy as lead, and they felt weak and faint. At last Sir Tor forced the other man down, and he called upon him to yield. No, that I will not, was the arrogant answer. Give me the white hound. I cannot, Sir Tor answered calmly. It is in my quest, and I must bring it or you or both back with me. Kill him, cried a voice, and there rode a lady towards them. Her eyes were wild with grief, and her face flushed with weeping. Grant me this boon, and kill him, as you are a knight and a gentleman. He is false, a traitor, and a murderer. He slew my brother before my eyes. I will grant this boon if it is indeed as you say, Sir Tor cried sternly, and he looked down at the fallen knight, who now in terror crept to his feet, his face betraying his guilt. Nay, do not kill me. I will yield me, he said in haste. You can take the white hound. Sir Tor's blue eyes were cold as steel. It is too late now, or I shall be false to my promise to this lady. You should have yielded when I asked you. Now you must die for your shameful deed. The false coward staggered to his feet and tried to make off, but Sir Tor followed and killed him. Now shall you and your servants and your poor, tired, hungry horses farewell this day, said the lady. You shall ride with me to my husband's castle and stay a while with us. He is full of stories of olden wars and ambushes, and we will eat together. Thanks for your bounty, said Sir Tor, smiling. But as for the horses, they fared right well on corn, while the men scraped the empty trenches. That shall we amend, laughed the lady, and whenever you are in these marches, our castle and all we own is at your service. Sir Tor spent a wondrous pleasant evening in the grim old fortalice in the pine forest. The knight and his lady and Sir Tor and his new squire sat them down to meat together. Capons and pasties were set out for them, and warm straw for their beasts. All the afternoon and long into the night they sat up, singing ballads and telling stories. Sir Tor's eyes shone, and he listened with delight to the tales of adventure and daring that the old knight told, while his lady sat by the hearth, embroidering a banner. When at last Sir Tor returned to Camelot, he was received with great joy, and they made him tell his adventures, though he was ill at ease and shy, and did not wish to speak. These are but a boy's summer japes compared with the great deeds this king's son shall do, said wise old Merlin. He shall be one of the best of all your knights, and true and faithful. Then we must reward him now, said King Arthur, and he gave him an earldom of lands that was in his gift. For we must not forget that had King Pellinore and I not espied him in time, this boy was about to venture all in an outworn suit of mail and a useless old sword. Truly, it is not the arms that make the man.